Hello, everybody, and welcome into this newest episode of New England Sports Weekly. As always, I am your host, Sean Metcalf, and I am glad that you have decided to join me again this evening. If you're watching live on the stream, or if you're listening to the podcast, hello, whatever day it is, and whatever time of the day, I'm hoping that you're having a good one out there, as it's been a frustrating couple of weeks here. If you're a Red Sox fan, I will tell you that today's podcast is pretty much going to be a Red Sox therapy session, at least for the first 30 minutes or so of the podcast. I can guarantee you that pretty much right now, as far as what's going on with this team in this podcast right now. That'll be what's coming right out of the chute here. But I mean, as far as everything else in life, everything's good. Everything couldn't be better. It's middle of the summertime, having some fun. Just had a good family and friends party over the weekend. Jimmy Buffett tailgate. Thanks to the Millers, if you're listening. It was a blast this weekend. Had a great time. Always look forward to that. And of course, just working, slaving away, playing in my men's 25 and over league. So everything's going good as far as the personal life. As far as sports are concerned, though, that's where mainly the Red Sox. That's where things have kind of taken a nosedive. So we'll see how well this goes. This podcast. We'll see if I can stay on the handle here, if I fly off of it, because man, it's been rough, and I'm sure a lot of you feel the same way. I have been losing my mind over this team. It's just been so frustrating to watch, and we'll get into that here shortly, but it's just banging your head against the wall. And look, I was actually kind of looking forward to this podcast today. It was a little bit of therapy as we go into this week. Now we'll jump right out of the box here. As we mentioned, it's been a tough couple of weeks for the Red Sox as they have continued to stumble, and stumble is very, very lightly putting it for the Red Sox. They are 2 for their last 10, so that makes them 12. That makes them 10 and 2 and 10 over their last 12 ball games. So this last week, because they've had a couple off days mixed into it, have just been absolutely terrible. See, I'm already getting worked up here, already getting tongue-tied because of this team is just pissing me off. It's gonna be fireworks here. But maybe the Red Sox might have a little bit of a savior coming here with Chris Sale, who is supposed to be making his season debut on Saturday against the Baltimore Orioles. So we'll see how that all shakes out. Hopefully, Chris Sale can give them a little bit of a boost and maybe not be 2017, early 2018 Chris Sale when he was in the running for the Cy Young in both years. But we'll see how things go, how things shake out for Chris Sale and the Red Sox down the stretch. And that it will be his first start in his last 2 years. So this is something 2 years in the making for Chris Sale. And I'm not exaggerating. This Saturday will mark exactly 2 years to the last time he took a major league mound for the Boston Red Sox. And of course, Patriots preseason is about to get underway as the NFL already has kicked it off with the Hall of Fame game last Thursday with the Pittsburgh Steelers and Dallas Cowboys squaring off. Of course, it's week 1, so we'll see how things go. The Cowboys this year Cowboys and Steelers get the luxury of having 4 preseason games because that doesn't really technically count as their first one. It's because the NFL always wants to have that Hall of Fame game. So if you get to play that Hall of Fame game now, you get the luxury of having 4 and get a little bit more time to evaluate your players. But nonetheless, it is opening week for the NFL as far as the preseason goes. Of course, there will be a lot to talk about for the Patriots, and this is probably one of the most anticipated preseasons here in a long time, especially with the quarterback battle, mainly because of it, but there are some other things that are going on for this team that are you'll have to look out for, and we'll outline all of that as we move forward. And of course, we can't let things go by without the Celtics news that they have signed Dennis Schroeder to a 1-year deal, who was a guard for a long time. He's still only 28, but it seems like he's been in the league forever. But he came in when he played when he's really young, and he played a long time with the Atlanta Hawks, and then last year played with the LA Lakers, as he was part of that quote unquote super team LeBron tried to put together with him and Davis, although they did win the title in the bubble, but injuries befell that team, and it was kind of an interesting decision. We'll get into that. Was Schroeder a little too headstrong, a little too egotistical? He was offered a huge deal by the Lakers and ended up having to settle for a smaller one with the Celtics. We'll get into that. If maybe you overplayed your hand trying to bet on losing $84 million and you might get more. Didn't quite work out for him. Maybe it did for the Celtics. We'll talk about that later on in the podcast. But as I mentioned, it's going to be an interesting show as we get into the Red Sox here. So we'll just jump right in. Don't want to waste any more time. As I mentioned, the Boston Red Sox have had one of the most frustrating, irritating, anger-inducing, throw whatever you want out there. It just pissed me off every time in the last 2 weeks, minus the 2 times they've won, miraculously. They have played uninspired, god-awful baseball. Even in these last 2 years where they've been a bad baseball team. I know 2019 for a little bit they were technically in the playoff race, but really I wasn't too upset with that, just because you kind of knew what was happening there. They didn't bring in a lot of youth. It was kind of just bring back the band there. Then there was the situation with Mookie Betts. Was he going to stay long term? So there were a lot of things that were up in the air, and that ended up being Dave Dombrowski's last year with the Red Sox, and he was fired in August, and they actually brought in Chaim Bloom, who we'll get into here in just a moment. But really, even over the last 2 years, and even during that 2012, 2014, 2015, during that like up and down stretch between the World Series titles of 13 and 18, there wasn't that feeling, that gut punch feeling during those seasons, because you kind of knew things were going to go south. I know they brought in Sandoval and Hanley Ramirez in 15, but you kind of knew with the pitching staff, the quote-unquote 5 aces in 2015, which was a joke to begin with. You kind of knew those seasons maybe might be a little entertaining, but you never thought this was going to be a serious contender. But with this team, the expectations to start the season, as we've talked about many times on the podcast, were low. I wouldn't say as low as they were last year when this team was awful and you had no expectations. So, like I said earlier, there was no gut punch to those seasons because you knew they were going to be bad. In this season, it kind of felt like it might be a little bit of the same, with a chance to be a little bit better, because you're getting your all-stars back, you're getting guys healthy, you have chance for guys to rebound, and then also on top of that, you had an actual major league staff with Pivetta. Chris Sale was coming along later on, would be here this weekend, but you started off the season with Evaldi, Erod came back, Nick Pivetta. Say what you will about Martin Perez and Richards, but they all have major league track records. These weren't guys like Nick Godfrey and throw out the peanut vendor and whoever else that they plucked out of the streets to go pitch for him last year. It was just bad. And actually one of the guys pitching for the Rays right now, who's actually pretty decent, looked horrible last year. So literally it was a hodgepodge, duct tape and glue pitching staff last year that you had no expectations. So fast forward to this year, you have at least mild expectations that maybe you could get back to 500, be competitive, try to build for the future, have guys like Devers, Bogarts, see what you have in Pavetta, guys that you're going to have here more than 1 year. And you brought in, and then you did bring in some guys to fill holes like a Hunter Renfroe, Marwin Gonzalez, and see what they have. And of course, as things started to roll through April, they lost the first series against Baltimore, but then they ripped through 9 straight wins. And then they finished the month, I believe it was in first place in April. They were battling back and forth with Tampa. New York and Toronto just got off to slow starts. New York was putrid to begin the year. And the Red Sox were just battling the Rays. They traded first place here and there. And then for a good chunk, the Red Sox, they didn't run away and hide because they weren't the furthest in front. They were 3.5 games ahead of Tampa. So they never put a 5, 6, 7, 8 games like they have against the Yankees, and even at some points 10.5 up on the Rays. They've always been within striking distance, but the Boston and the Rays and Houston and Chicago White Sox, those were the 4 best teams in baseball. And for a while, the Red Sox had the best record in the American League. So that's where you have to change expectations as you get towards the All-Star break. That's an 80, 90 game sample size, 100 game sample size as you got up to the trade deadline. So that's not, oh, this is 20 games, it's 30 games, it's still early on in the season. You've seen plenty of teams play good through 20 to 30 games, maybe 40. That's a small, when you're about a quarter of a way through, that's where you can start to take them a little serious, but it's still early enough. But once you get into that 80 games, once you get past that 82 game, that halfway mark, that's more than enough for you to make judgments on. Well, way more than enough to make judgments on. And the Red Sox proved that they were a good team. Just based off of that, they played well early on. They took the first 4 out of Tampa. And yes, the Yankees were putrid, but at least they were seen as a contender coming into the year. And they took the first 7 games against New York. And the only team that they really struggled with were the Houston Astros. That was the one team that I didn't want to see them play because it was just bad early on in the season. But other than that, even the Chicago White Sox, they split that 4-game series early on, 2 games apiece. So they played decently enough against the White Sox, who they'll see later on this season in Chicago. Hopefully things have started to turn around by that point. But the point being is that it's not like they played a bunch of dregs of the league early on. Obviously, they played Baltimore and they have played some bad teams, but you get my point. It's not like early on in the season all they played were just dregs of the league. They ended up having games against really good teams like the White Sox, the Astros, the Rays. Like I said, minus everything against the Astros, they played really well. And I was really happy with how the outcome of things were. Their pitching wasn't great outside of Evaldi, who made the All-Star team, and their bullpen was a major, I should say the starting rotation, because the starting rotation wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. It kept you in games. They'd give up 3-4 runs, and with this offense, the way it was swinging the bats, they were playing really well. And the bullpen surprisingly came out of nowhere to be a savior of this team. And they played out of their minds. They were playing like their hair on fire in the best way possible. I mean, they had a few rough ones there in April, but everybody has pretty much was locked in since the middle of May. And then fast forward to the trade deadline. We all wanted something. We all did. Or I should say most of us did. Most of us wanted a first baseman. Most of us wanted some help in the pitching staff. I wanted a starter Because even with the struggles lately of the bullpen, I still think this is a good pen. They've been frustrated. Don't get me wrong. Last night, I was ready to throw my remote into the TV after Barnes absolutely threw up all over himself. That was bad. That was awful. But still, that was the least of my worries when it came to the trade deadline. Yeah, could you, in retrospect, could you have tried to go out and gotten Craig Kimbrell to bring him back here and slide Barnes back in the 8th hole and then lengthen it out? Yeah, that would have been nice. But again, you had 6 guys between Matt Barnes, Adam Ottavino, Garrett Whitlock, Josh Taylor, Hirakaru Sawamura, and up until his injury, just a week and a half ago, you had Darwinson Hernandez. Those were 6 guys that anybody would want. Were they all stars? No, but they were pretty damn good because middle relievers rarely make the all-star team. It's all closers for the most part. So the point being with this is that when you got to the trade deadline, they needed help. And I wasn't saying that you had to go out there and you had to make trades for Max Scherzer. Yes, I know when I did the show for the trade deadline, I know I said Scherzer and Rizzo and some of those top tier targets. We'll get to Rizzo here in a second. He's a little bit of a separate case, but really the big one there that I'm sure a lot of people out there wanted was Max Scherzer. But of course, that was more of a pipe dream. And I realized that. I was thinking guys more like Kyle Gibson or Marquez or John Gray out of Colorado. Some of those tier guys, or even Alex Cobb, for Christ's sake. Those type of guys were the ones that I was looking at when it came to the trade deadline. And of course, I was thinking Jonathan Scope and Santana. Now, obviously, some of those teams, like the Royals, stupidly decided, all right, we'll trade Danny Duffy, but that's going to be it. We're not going to give away our first baseman that's 35 years old and really isn't part of the future, or Jonathan Scope with the Tigers, who again isn't part of the future. I would have taken one of those two in a heartbeat. I wanted Santana over Scope, but I would have taken either one of them. So those are the type of guys that I was asking for. And of course, Anthony Rizzo, yes, he's a big name, but he had a down year, so I thought the price would be cheap. So again, those were guys that I was looking at that if you're Chaim Bloom, you had to make a move to improve the team. Now, I know some people out there, and I got into some arguments out on social media, mainly Twitter. Take a look at my feed at Sean Met, at @_ Sean Met. Give me a follow. And before I dive off the deep end here, don't forget to follow at NE Sports Weekly at Twitter and send me any of your questions as well. But the point being here is that I definitely got into some Twitter fights last night with at Boston Strong 34, who is basically a big Red Sox Twitter account, and he also has his Instagram account, which he has some decent content. But for the love of God, when you put out a tweet defending Chaim Bloom that Chaim Bloom that he's done everything right, that he's basically doesn't have a blemish for not doing this, or for basically saying that shut up if you're saying anything negative against Chaim Bloom for not making a move, well, and then criticizing you that, oh, you don't want a future. No, God damn it, I do want a future. Of course I do. Of course I don't want to be where the Red Sox were in between 2014 through 14, 15, and then 19 and 20. So basically every time since the 2013 World Series and in between 18, they had that real stretch between 16 and 18 where they were winning the division. So they had a 3-year stability, but pretty much every time they've had those peaks and those bad valleys. Of course, I don't want to go back to that. Of course, I would rather be. Now, obviously, I'd rather have more championships than this team, but I'd rather be the 90s through mid 2000s Braves, from 91 to 2000, 2006, 2007, where they're winning the division pretty much every year, yes, of course, I would rather be the Braves. I would rather be in that situation with obviously more World Series titles. But yeah, I would want to be competing for the division every year, being in the title run every year. Yes, I want to be in that position. But you have to adjust your expectations. You have to. That is something that you can't just sit there and ignore when you're at a position of being the best record in the American League, and for a time you're tied with the Giants for the best record in baseball. You have to adjust your expectations. Now, I'm not just talking about the fans. I'm talking about Chaim Bloom. Yes, I'm not asking you to go out and trade away Tristan Casas, Jaron Duran, Mata, or obviously some of the guys that you just drafted, and probably now you're best. Well, Casas was lighting up the Olympics, but basically between Casas and now probably their best prospect and Marcelo Meyer, and then Blaze Jordan and York. No, I'm not asking you to go out and trade away some of those top prospect or guys that you think are going to be top prospects or already are. No, don't do that. But for Christ's sake, when you see the New York Yankees go out there and trade away their 13th and ninth pick, and I know some people are going to say, well, of course, but the Yankees have a better farm system than you. They've been stockpiling pieces. But yeah, that still, their 13th best wasn't MLB's 100 best prospects. Now, the ninth might have been down there in the 70, like somewhere in between, like in that last quarter of them, and then 70s, 80s, or 90s, somewhere in that neighborhood. But still, you're not giving somebody up in the top 50 prospects in baseball, or the top 25 or top 10 prospects in baseball, or hell, even the top 5 prospects in your system. So if you even readjust it for the Red Sox, okay, so you have to give up your number 9 and your number 7 prospects. That's still not Casas. It's still not Duran. It's still not Mata. It's still not Houck. It's still not somebody of that caliber, or Blaze Jordan or somebody like that. You were giving up somebody like an not Eloy Jimenez, but Gilberto Jimenez. I know a lot of people are high on him, but I'm just saying you're not going to give up somebody that's going to cost you a whole future. That's my point. If you're Bloom, go out there, and if the price is low on Rizzo, which I'll be honest, I didn't think that Rizzo was going to be a target for the Yankees because they have Luke Voit. Yes, I know he's injured often, but still the point being is that he's not – he was the least of my worries for the Yankees to get. There really was nobody that, until the whole Voit thing went down, that I thought the Yankees would target that the Red Sox would. Leave Scherzer out of this, because even the quotes came out that I guess the Red Sox weren't even seriously looking at Scherzer. There were just a lot of smoke, which that's what happens this time of year. But the point being is that they were looking at Joey Gallo, guys like that, big thumpers that would strike out a ton and walk. That's not who the Red Sox were looking at. They needed a first baseman. They already had a great middle of the order, but the way things have, but basically what happened is that the Yankees came in, they stole Rizzo, and it's not like they gave up their top 5 prospects, anybody like that, to get him. That's something that the Red Sox could have seriously have done. I would have liked to have seen what the package was when they were engaged in those talks. Or not to even go out and get another first baseman. And I know Colorado shut down talks with a lot of guys, but you couldn't have at least talked to him about C.J. Cron, at least, because he's got power. Yeah, he struck out a lot and his average is low, but hell, it's better than what Bobby Dahlbeck is doing. At least he's hit home runs and driven in runs. Now, Bobby's only got, I believe at this point, 11 to 12 home runs and not even cracked the 40 RBI mark at this point, and is hitting barely above the Mendoza line. So the point, you just go out there and get, at least if you're going to get in there and produce runs, so you're not an automatic out every time, at least you're going to produce every now and then. But come on, don't come at me with the, well, Bloom is doing his best. Bloom had, when some jackass out there came at me and was like, well, you know that Bloom is under orders to get underneath the salary cap, not the salary cap, but the luxury tax. That's what he was ordered to do, right? That he needs to get under and sell these pieces away. No shit, Sherlock. That's why he traded away Mookie friggin' Betts. That's why. That's why he did that. And guess what? They got under the luxury tax for this year. They might not be 25 million under there where you're going to be able to afford everybody, but for Christ's sake, you're now at that point where you can at least add somebody that doesn't have an absorbent contract. And that's why I'm saying hit a guy like CJ Crone. And until I knew that Scope was off the market or somebody else, then yes. And before you come at me with the whole Kyle Schwarber, which I was excited for Kyle Schwarber. Don't get me wrong. I wanted Schwarber on this team from a standpoint of the power in the bat. I was excited, but you got a DH first baseman that has a bum hamstring right now. At least the news, throw in a little bit of news here. Cora came on his weekly radio interview with WEEI, give them some credit, and he basically came out and said that it sounds this isn't official yet, but it sounds like if things go well with Schwarber, he's going to go out on a rehab here, possibly as early as tomorrow. So you might get him back here in the next week, hopefully. But the only thing that he did was go out and get albeit an all-star slugging outfielder DH type, but he's hurt. He's not here to come and give you that injection of juice into the lineup and that excitement that all these other teams got out there. And yes, that excitement helps the players too. It's not just for us fans. Just even listen to some of these professional athletes, especially some of these baseball players. They've even come out and said it. Those additions, when you're in the run for a pennant, it helps. It gives you that extra energy to know that the front office believes in us. They believe in us. And what happened is Bloom came and kicked you right in the fucking nuts is what he did. That's what he did. He said, listen, yes, maybe I might be a little exaggerating here, but the point being with this whole thing is that if you're a player in the Red Sox clubhouse, you have to feel a little betrayed that, wait, we were this good. Why weren't we getting help? Why? Why didn't you go get us a first baseman? We're not asking you for somebody to go out there and hit 40 and get like a 40 home run, 50 home run first baseman. Go out and get us a guy that can at least hit for somewhat of an average or can at least produce runs as a 20 to maybe a 30 home run type of guy. Go out there and get that, or get us some help in the pitching staff, a decent starting pitcher. Or Christ, if you're going to add to the bullpen, don't get us Hansel friggin' Robles or Davis from the Pittsburgh Pirates. You got fringe guys that are barely going to make your bullpen. They're probably not even going to make the damn playoff roster. If they even make it that far, they don't fall off the face of the fucking earth at this point. My God. People need to pull their head out of the sand that are just thinking, oh, no, everything's going to be all right. And then if you're one of those people at the end of the season that sits there and tells me that, oh, it's okay that the Red Sox didn't make the playoffs, that there were no expectations coming into this year. Shut up. Shut the hell up. You know why? You know why I'm pissed off? Because I told you have to adjust your expectations. This team has played well enough to the All-Star break and to the trading deadline where they showed you have to invest in this team. They were a true contender. Now, I know things are going bad right now, but they still have a grip on that last wild card spot. It might be slipping away, but at least they're still in contention. And maybe there's a miracle and maybe they win the division still. Because I told you I thought they were going to win this division, but the last 2 weeks have really put a giant dent into that, and I've kind of given up on the division. I still think they're going to make the wild card, but hell, it's not looking good. It's not looking good at all, folks. It looks god-awful right now in this slump that they're mired in, and I think if you gave them some injection of getting an Anthony Rizzo, getting some type of first baseman, maybe getting a Kyle Gibson, getting some anybody else than the slop that they got from Hansel Robles and Austin Davis, then yes, I'd feel better about this team. I'm not going to say that they were going to win 10 out of the 12. They're going to go 10-2 instead of going 2-10, or hell, go 7-3, 7-4, whatever it is. No, I'm not going to say they're going to have a winning record, but hell, maybe you have a 500 record during this period instead of being the god awful garbage hot mess that you are right now. And now let me just move to the team itself. I know I blasted Hein Bloom here for the last 15 minutes, but where my anger is going to go to next is the players themselves. Yes, I understand you're upset, and I would be too in that locker room if you didn't get help at the trade deadline, when you knew that you're a good team, and then your GM basically quit on you and punched you right in the gut. I get it. But still, you're professional baseball players. At some point, you have to grab yourself in the nether region, nut up, and actually go out there and compete. You have to stop feeling bad for yourself and whining. Myself as a fan, all the other Red Sox fans out there, all the talk shows, TV, they can continue to whine and bitch. They can. We can do that because we're not playing. But you as the players, yeah, maybe a day, maybe 2 days, whatever. Maybe that series against Tampa Bay where you're pissed off, sure. But after that, your mulligan was over. You have to stop crying, stop bitching and complaining, go out there and just realize that you're at this point. You do have Schwarber at some point coming back, and Chris Sale will be coming back, and Tanner Houck is going to be that other pitcher that you're going to slide in there. And Tanner Houck is really good. I've liked what I've seen out of Tanner Houck. But you just have to realize that you just have to come to that realization that, okay, we do have one bat that's coming. Yes, it might not be a first baseman, but guess what? We'll have another guy that has some punch come into the lineup, and we have some other help in that rotation coming. You have to sack up, and you have to go out there and play baseball. And that series against Detroit was probably the worst series I've seen all year. They came out and played the most uninspired baseball minus that one win. They came out and they slugged the 3 home runs. They won 4-1. But other than that, especially that last game, that getaway game before they headed to Toronto, that made me so mad. I was so pissed off watching that game. Just sitting there and watching them kick it away, giving up in bats. You lost 8-1 to the Tigers, to the goddamn Tigers, who are one of the worst teams in the Central. One of the other, if the Baltimore Orioles didn't exist in the American League and the Arizona Diamondbacks didn't exist, they might be in contention for one of the worst teams, even though they've had some decent production from a few guys, surprisingly. It's just they've been awful. And you lost to that team. You lost that series to that team. And then the real not gut buster, but the real ball buster, one where you felt like you got a steel toe right into the gonads, was that Toronto series. And they lost 3 of the 4 to one of the better teams, a team that is hard charging, got one of the better offenses in all of baseball, especially Vlad Guerrero Jr. And then they traded for Barrios to put him with Maeda. I'm sorry, Ryu. They both were on that same Dodgers staff for a while. Oh, wow. Sorry. Just happened to look down. The Red Sox are up 10-0 on the Rays. About goddamn time. About time that offense woke up and decided to put this team on their back, to be quite frank. So it's good to see. But getting back to the podcast here, it was just disappointing to go into that series where you knew you had to split. You knew you had to. And you had a chance on Sunday. I got back from my men's league game. I sat down. I was watching that. I was tired as hell because I went to as mentioned, I went to that Jimmy Buffett party, stayed up till 12, and had a doubleheader that I had to get up at 7 o'clock so I could make it in town. So I was tired, but I still tried to watch that, and I got to the point where they were up 7-2. Then then it was 7-5, and it was 8-6 in the eighth inning. I was so tired. I'm like, okay, I'll try to stay awake here, and then I'll nap after. I ended up falling asleep before that ninth inning came, just because I was so tired. And when I woke up, they lost 9-8. 9. They lost on a walk-off home run, thanks to Matt Barnes, who has looked awful during this 2-week stretch. Awful, 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 awful. He's just lost faith in that fastball, which really scares me. That really scares me, because that's your all-star closer. And if he's reverting back to his old self, then, oh man, this team is in trouble. Maybe you might try to put a Ottavito into that role. He's done it a little bit when he was out in Colorado, but man, that's scary if he's going to revert back. So hopefully he finds his form. But that was the backbreaker right there, that game, that Sunday game. Well, that's at least what I thought. And then last night was the cherry on top. That was you thought you hit rock bottom. Watch this. That was rock bottom saying, hold my beer. The Red Sox were up 4-1 at one point. Then Garrett Whitlock absolutely comes in and has the worst outing of his career early on. He's been lights out. If there's a case for a middle reliever to be an all-star, it was for Whitlock. But this was his worst outing of the year by far. Gives up the 2 runs. It's tied 4-4. The Red Sox make it all the way to the 9th. Then Matt Barnes comes in. He has trouble right away. Gives up the double to Rosarena. Walks a couple batters with 2 outs. Then you have one of the worst plays I've seen all year. Even technically it wasn't a play, but one of the worst situations I've seen, when you have Franchi Cordero, who should not even be on this damn team. I know he swung the bat a little bit better when he came up, but he still is what you expect out of Franchi. Nothing, really. So you had Franchi Cordero, who missed a pop-up. If he catches that, maybe Barnes doesn't have to throw as many pitches, and then he ends up just getting his lunch handed to him with the bases loaded. The Rays go on to score 8 runs, and the Red Sox just absolutely choke that game away. And the bullpen, my God. During this 2-week stretch, I'll give it to everybody on the team. Everybody at some point has contributed to this. At one point, the offense was anemic, couldn't score anything, even when the pitching was decent. And then you had games where the starting pitching was getting their lunch handed to them. And then in that Toronto series, the offense was played okay, not great. They had one game where they scored at a decent clip. And then last night they scored 4. Now tonight looks like the anomaly. Maybe this might be the start of something good. They scored 10, but they have absolutely that bullpen has gotten their teeth kicked in that Toronto series, and last night against Tampa. And like I said, this bullpen was something that I liked. That was one of the strengths of their team. But over this 2-week stretch, especially since the Toronto series, no, they've been absolutely putrid. They've given up 21. The stat that surprised me the most was over the 21 innings over this 2-week stretch, the bullpen has given up 21 runs. 21 runs. That is unacceptable. Unacceptable. I know they've probably been taxed to this point because you've had a lot of starters. Martin Perez, who thank God is now in the bullpen. I don't want to see him back in that rotation. And after this year is over, I don't ever want to see Martin Perez in the Red Sox uniform ever again, along with Garrett Richards. Those two could take a hike for all I cared. Thumb it on 295 down there in Mass. Get on the red line. Get the hell out of Boston. I don't ever want to see your ass again. But for the meantime, they're both been banished to the bullpen. And Richards was banished today, and he wasn't happy about it. Whatever, go cry about it like you did your jacket in the cold and spider tack and everything else. I really could give a shit, Richards. You have Really irritated me. But the point being at this time is that when you've got decent performances, the bullpen itself has just imploded lately, and that was a strength of this team, and it has been so upsetting to see. Now, can the Red Sox get out of it? I think I I am not entirely confident in this. I say this hesitantly just because, like I said earlier, 80 to 100 games of a sample size is a giant sample size, and that's not something you can sneeze at for that long. They were one of the best teams, not just in the American League, but in all of baseball. So you can't sit there and tell me that they're they can't be this bad for much longer. Now, did they do too much damage to themselves right now where you might not be able to get back into the division? That's the thing that I think the division might be out of reach now with even I know you still have with tonight's game counting, I think you have 5 or 6 more against Tampa at this point. I'll have to take a look at that, but you still have games at hand with Tampa. So is it implausible that it happens? No. But as it stands right now, if they hold on tonight, then you'll be 4 back. And depending on what happens tonight, yeah, Tampa could go on one of those streaks like they did, because they actually kind of had a streak like the Red Sox had where they were bad after they lost Glasnow for a while. So it happens, but the Tampa had it earlier on and the Red Sox are having it now. So they couldn't have it at a worse time. But as far as things have gone, it's you have to think that this is the worst, and I've said that for the last 2 weeks and it still hasn't gotten better. But you have to think that there have been signs. The offense has started to slowly but surely come out of it. Kike Hernandez is starting to swing the bat like he did before, right before the All-Star break and right after. And Xander Bogaerts tonight has put together some good at-bats. And JD Martinez is the one that still scares me a little bit. Yes, he had a good night against Toronto in that second game of the the Sunday game against Toronto. Rafael Devers and Martinez are the two that once you kind of get those guys going again, then I'll feel even better. But for now, with Kike Hernandez, Hunter Renfroe starting to kind of heat up again, and Xander Bogaerts starting to find his swing a little bit, and then Kevin Plawecki playing decent. And actually, for a while, he was hitting 500 over these last 3 weeks. So you have some good signs there, and Jarren Duran has really kind of cut down on the strikeouts and making more contact. So I do like what you've gotten out of this team so far going through this last 3 games or so. As far as offensively, I've seen the signs of it. Pitching wise, the starting rotation, they haven't been lights out, but they've kept you in games. They pitch pretty well. Right now, Eovaldi is into will be going here into the 5th here shortly, but he's pitched okay tonight. He's dropped a scoreless frame so far. Knock on wood. But the point being is that the starting pitching has played okay. His pitch okay. It's the one thing that still scares me is the bullpen. Right now, the bullpen is hemorrhaging. Is really hemorrhaging runs out there right now. That is the one thing that they have to get corrected immediately, because right there, if Matt Barnes comes in and closes out that game on Sunday, you have a split of the series. Not the best thing, but you still take 2. And at that point, you're not far behind Toronto. Last night, if Whitlock doesn't come in and have his worst outing, and then if Matt Barnes doesn't come in, it wasn't a save, it was tie, but if he comes in, shuts down that inning, then maybe you win that. So right there, you're looking at 3 in a row because they won game 2 of the doubleheader. They would have, because they won game 2 of the doubleheader against Toronto. And if Barnes closes that down on Sunday, that's 2. And then obviously easy math right there. You win last night, and that's 3. So things would be looking so much better. Even as minute as that would sound, it's not like you still ended up that trip with at 500, but still, things still look so much better if they're able to turn that around right there. But that's the one thing that is worrisome so far, is that the bullpen still hasn't been found a way to come back to their reality. Well, I shouldn't say reality, because maybe that's what they might be, but at least come back to what they have been this year. I say this hesitantly, but I think they're going to get the top wild card spot, because I think Tampa just has a little too much. No, they're not. Tampa's not loaded with all-stars, but they found a way to compete. Yeah, they do have some good pieces there. They haven't really had, minus their slump back in June, where the Red Sox were able to get back in the first. They haven't really had long periods of struggles. So I don't see Tampa slipping too much, but like I said, you do have some games, so it's not like the division is lost and all gone. But I don't see them being able to make up enough ground in 47 games left here in the season. So it's not ideal. It's not great, Bob, but you have to remember you're still in a wild card spot. The Yankees, yes, they made the additions of Gallo and the additions of Rizzo, but Rizzo's on the COVID-19 list now. And to me, Gallo was just a replica of another Aaron Judge. I'm sorry, not Aaron Judge, a replica of what Giancarlo Stanton has become this year, these last couple of years, where he's just, okay, I'll hit a 5,000-foot home run, but then I'll go over my next 30. And then, okay, I'll have my 20 to 30 plus dinger, but then I won't get on base. I'm not getting on base, not driving in enough runs. And it's just, okay, you're a slugger with the air quotes, but you're not really a full-on superstar like it looked like that was the trajectory of him after he won that MVP in Miami, and then the Yankees traded for him. It looked like, oh boy, here we go. Here are the Twin Towers there, and the monster mashers in the New York lineup. Okay, sure, but then no, he hasn't been that. And then so you went out and traded Joey Gallo, who does walk more, but really it's other than walking more, it's the same thing as Stanton, just hits moonshots. Okay, so Rizzo was the only true upgrade that they got. So I still think the Yankees have as many problems as the Red Sox as far as holes. It's just that the Red Sox hit the slump at the wrong time. But yes, I am hitting the I've lightly tapped the panic button. I'm panicked, but I'm not slamming my hand off of it 10 times. I probably pressed it once and just kind of hold my breath that things kind of turn around here. And it looks like the offense might be able to do that. They start to come out of it. So we'll see how things go. And I'm barely saying that they're going to get that wild card spot, that they're going to get one of those two. And like I said, I think they'll get the top one, but it's not going to be pretty. I'll tell you that much. It's the way things have gone. I don't think it's going to be a pretty stretch to the finish. Are they going to limp into the playoffs? I don't. Maybe, but it's going to be a tough stretch here. Now the good thing is their schedule starts to lighten up. They get Baltimore this weekend. They get the Indians, who have kind of fallen off the map. They end up getting some of those dregs of the league. So you get to go out there and bat and hopefully pump up yourself, play better against some of these bad teams. I know you played Detroit, but maybe things start to turn around here. So we'll see how things go. Like I said, I've tapped the panic button lightly, and we'll see how it goes. I have my confidence is hanging on a thread with this team. I'll put it that way. It's still alive, but it's hanging on barely hanging on. I'll tell you that much. Now, as I mentioned, Patriots training camp is opening up. Patriots preseason is opening up this week, as they've been in training camp since July 24th, 25th, towards the end of July there. So they've had 2 weeks here of camp. things have gone pretty well here for the Patriots as far as with the quarterback competition. It's been some ups and downs for Cam Newton, a little few more downs. Mac Jones has, from reports, from the credible reports out there, from the Mike Giardis, from the Mike Reeses, all those guys that have been writing about the Patriots for a long time, have been in plenty of camps. They've said that it's pretty much kind of been that Mac might have a slight edge. He hasn't exactly blown him out of the water, but he's shown the ability to pick up the playbook, make those reads. Yes, there'll be some times where he hold on to ball longer. He might not make all the correct reads, but for a rookie coming in, picking up a pro system, well, not that he didn't have a pro system down in Alabama, but picking up a true pro system with the greatest coach of all time, he's come in and he's played pretty well in training camp. Now, listen, I'm not going to be one of those guys that's going to be retweeting all those reporters out there. They're like, okay, Cam went 5 for 12, or he went 7 for 22, and then Mac Jones is out there going 10 for 15 or 9 for 21 or something like that, or vice versa. If one has a good day, one has a bad day. Because how many times do you know the situation? Do you know that, okay, this was against 7-on-7s, this was with pads or without pads, or they were just kind of like a baseball pitcher in spring training where they're not throwing their fastball. All they're throwing are sliders, curveballs, changeups to work on those. You don't know the situations in practice, so it could be maybe a full practice where all the chains are taken away, where they're all out there just playing at full speed and playing the way it's supposed to be. Or are they playing in situational packages? Are they not going? Is the defense not making that play? And is N'Keal Harry going up against the fourth string corner or some undrafted free agent, or vice versa? So you never know what's happening with those throws that you see out there. So that always drives me nuts when I see, oh, so-and-so, Cam Newton or Mac Jones made X amount of throws or missed this one or sailed this one. Now, of course, I want Mac to start, so yeah, it might be a little hypocritical sometimes when I see that Mac might have struggled. When Cam might have struggled a little bit, yeah. And now, like I said, a million times, Cam as a person, love him as a person. He's been great here in New England. But the point being, when it comes to Cam, is that, or with Mac and Cam in this camp, is that they're pretty much even when it comes to their whole situation as far as who's going to be the starter, who's going to be the backup. Now, what I would do if I'm the Patriots, I think if all things are even, or if Mac has the slighter edge, even though you're pretty loyal to your veterans, if you're Belichick, why not push the start button on your future as far as at quarterback? Now, I know we spent a whole segment of talking about the Red Sox going for it and trying to balance their future as well. But I think the Patriots, it's a different ball game from the standpoint that, yes, you brought in some veterans as in Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry and Matthew Judon on the defensive side, as well as Jalen Mills and Devin Godchow and a lot of these guys that they brought in, some veterans, but they're not exactly like 30 plus year. They're not like 30 plus year old veterans. These are guys that are still 25, 26, 27. They're the oldest one that you brought back was Kyle Van Noy, who's 30 or 31. So basically what I'm saying at this point is that, yes, you brought in veterans, you loaded up, but they're young enough where they can grow with Mac. You can still build around it. And this team is built, and I know I talked about this last week, but I still believe that this team is built for a guy like Mac Jones, where you have your tight ends who you're not asking him to throw 40 yards down the field or throw deep to these wide receivers. You're talking about guys throwing the with guys like James White at running back, where you have these tight ends where you're running these short intermediate routes, and guys like Jacoby Myers, yes, you're going to have your Nelson Aguilar who's going to be out there, but of course, if you're not asking him to run complicated routes either, at least that would be my assumption. I mean, you're asking him to run some goes, some flies, maybe some deep posts, and obviously we know Matt can hit those. We saw him do that at Alabama, but the point being is you're not asking him to come in here and run some really complicated pass system, because I don't think Belichick is going to all of a sudden just open everything up like he did for Brady, because Brady was there for 20 goddamn years. Of course, Brady's going to have every single play. He probably wrote about 5 more offensive playbooks with him, Belichick, and Josh McDaniels. Brady probably co-authored that, or was one of the main authors of doing that. But of course, when you're going to play that intermediate game and then have a balanced run attack with arguably a breakout candidate in Damian Harris, then yeah, I think this team is built for Mac Jones, where you can dump this off to the tight ends, you can dump this off to the running backs, and then you're going to have a reliable slot guy in Jacoby Myers, and then that's where you kind of work in the rest of the receiving core, and you don't ask him to really dig into that tree, that route tree, to that playbook until you're probably about halfway or 3/4 of the way through the season, where you might be able to kind of open things up just a slight amount more, maybe not to the full amount, but you can at least give them maybe 20 more pages or 10 or whatever it may be. But really, my whole point in the matter here is that this team should be built for Mac to start. And like I said, I just don't want to see Cam out there anymore. Not because I don't like him as a person, but just because I've seen everything I have that I needed to see out of Cam. He doesn't have it anymore. Yeah, he can still run like a fullback, but he just doesn't have the ability. He's using his whole body to throw. He's not. It's like a whole body shot put, and it's ugly to watch. I don't think he has it anymore. That shoulder shot, everything throwing wise is pretty much shot. And I know people want to say, well, give him a chance with the weapons that they loaded up with, but I just don't think that that's going to help him with the physical abilities that he lacks at this point now. It's not 2015 Cam Newton. If you're expecting 2015 Cam Newton to be walking through the door, you're not getting it. He's not going to show up. You're just going to get happy-go-lucky Cam that is banged up and is past his prime and is just basically a glorified fullback that can occasionally throw not great passes, to be honest. So I can't wait to see how things go here in the preseason opener here with Mac. And we'll get into here in a second as far as what we want to see, what I want to see out of this game one as we go tomorrow night when they play the Washington football team. Had to catch myself there. Almost called them the unforgiven name that we can't say because they took it away. It's offensive because that was the bargaining chip that the NFL had against Daniel Snyder. But that's another story for another day. But my whole point in this whole thing is that I think Mac, even if they're on even playing fields or Mac is just slightly above him, I think that's where you have to give him the start. You have to say, all right, let's just do it. Screw it. We'll put him out there, and you have enough pieces around him where I don't think it's going to be a complete disaster. Now, somebody that has looked like a complete disaster has been N'Keal Harry. N'Keal Harry was their first round pick at number 32 in the 2019 draft. You thought you were getting like an Anquan Bolden type when they first picked him in the draft. He's not a speed guy, but he'll go out there. He'll catch those intermediate maybe a few deep routes here and there, but he'll be that physical guy that can kind of go across the middle. Like I said, Anquan Bolden, bully guys. He's been a bust. He hasn't gone out there as bully guys. He kind of goes down at first contact, at least the last couple of years. But at least the stories out of camp is that he's playing really well. He's making good catches. He hasn't been bullied as much. He's been out there, been a little bit more physical. He's maybe his agent going out there and requesting a trade in a weird way kind of sparked things for him. Maybe. I'm not sure. But, I mean, hey, if you can get something out of N'Keal Harry, which you frankly haven't gotten anything out of Harry over the last 2 years, he's not a complete no-show, but it's pretty damn close. You've gotten pretty much nothing out of this. And Belichick normally, he might not get Hall of Famers in the first round all the time, but he normally does not whiff that much. I can count probably just Dominic Easley, who I was surprised they took because he had 2 knees that were pretty much shot. And nobody wanted to touch him with a 10-foot pole until New England came along in the end of the first round that year. And then you have N'Keal Harry. So those were the 2 that looked like bust. Now, if N'Keal Harry, I'm not asking N'Keal Harry to come out here and have a 1,200-yard season and catch 12 touchdowns, 15 touchdowns, something like that, and be crazy and be a true number 1. But if you can come out there, catch 40 to 50 balls, have 500 to 700 yards receiving, be a reliable body that can be out there and at least trusted to make a few plays here and there, now I would be happy with that. I certainly would. Because, to be honest, it's not like this wide receiving core is flushed with all pros, Hall of Famers. It's Nelson Aguilar, who himself looked like he might be a first-round bust until his last couple of years where he started to turn that career around. Now, he still doesn't have sticky hands out there where he's going to be able to catch those babies getting dropped out of the burning billies. Thank you, Phil. Thanks for coming, Philly. But yeah, I don't think he's going to be your number 1 or a true number 1. He might be a quote unquote number 1 on this team, but it's more just out of necessity. But you have Aguilar, who, he's an okay receiver. Nothing to me, he's nothing special. He's a speed merchant, but that has trouble with the drops. Then you have Kendrick Bourne, who came in from San Francisco, who to me is a little bit of a clone of Jacoby Myers, maybe a little bit more speed. So you have him, and then you bring in, or I'm sorry, not that you bring in, but then you have one of the more intriguing receivers. This is the one that I'm a little more excited for over the newcomers, to be honest, is Jacoby Myers, who has been a slot machine, it seems like, in practice, because there was at one point where Mike Reese with ESPN said that Myers had caught 22 or 23 passes. So it looks like he's got good hands. He might be the next one to step in line and take over for the Edelman, the Troy Brown, Danny Amendolas in the slot position. Now, am I expecting him to be an all-pro receiver? No. But if you can be somebody that can get you 800 to 900 receiving yards, maybe push the 1,000-yard mark, that might be, pun intended, pushing it there. But if you can be that solid go-to slot guy where they need that catch, where we did see him make those when Cam Newton actually wasn't bouncing passes on the turf or overthrowing guys by 10 yards or underthrowing them on Hail Marys by 15 yards, then I think that's something where you've already kind of seen that in a Myers. Now, if you bring in Mac Jones and he's the starter, then great. I think you have a good combo going right there with Mac Jones and Jacoby Myers. And then who knows, maybe you draft another receiver here in the next year or two that you compare with those guys. And then voila, then you're starting to build that base there and adding some more talent to this team that you've already kind of brought in to kind of level things out and bring it back up to an NFL level. But the point being here is that N'Keal Harry, it's not like you have Calvin Johnson's in front of you, not like you have Julio Jones, A.J. Brown, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. I think I could go on and on, Justin Jefferson, guys like that you have sitting in front of you that are bona fide number ones. So you have an opportunity. So if you can go out there and prove that, I know you wanted to a trade out of there, but do you have an opportunity right in front of you? And I nagged on that whole situation a couple weeks ago when it first came out, and I laughed at it that you wanted to be traded because you had an opportunity here. Well, guess what? Maybe he actually got that through his skull. Maybe Belichick brought him into his office and kind of pantsed him there, so to speak. And because I've actually heard players talk about that Belichick will do that. He'll be like, okay, you want to trade? Then he'll pull up a tape of you in practice or in games making mistakes over and over again or making drops, not fixing the issue. And that straightened guys out. And that's really like, oh, okay, maybe I need to get my shit together here. And I think maybe that's what happened with N'Keal Harry, where Belichick showed him maybe some of those tapes of practice and games where it's like, we needed you to make that play. You want to get traded? You want more money? Why don't you clean that crap up? Why don't you clean that shit up? So I maybe that's what happened. I can't confirm that, but who knows? Maybe that's what happened here with N'Keal Harry, and maybe that's what scared him straight, kind of in that way. Is that I might be, even if I go to a different team, maybe I'm not that good. Maybe I need to go out there and work a little harder. Now, again, like I said earlier, when it comes to quarterback reps and training camp, you can't stand there the whole time and be like, oh, okay. Oh, Mac Jones went 15 for 20. Yeah, but or Cam Newton going 7 for 30 or something like that. It's like, yeah, he did, but you have to understand that you were maybe at that time, Mac Jones, maybe he played against some of the stars, which I'm just throwing this out there as an example because it seems like he played with a lot of the first teamers. But the whole point is that you don't know who he's playing against. Maybe it was Jawan Williams or some undrafted free agent or a bubble guy, like I said, like Williams that are out there. And, oh, you beat him? Okay, good for you. You didn't beat J.C. Jackson. You can't throw Stephon Gilmore out there yet just because he's still dealing with that whole contract situation. But the point being is that you can't just, like with the quarterbacks, you have to say the same when it comes to N'Keal Harry. Was he facing Jawan Williams? Was he facing the undrafted rookie? Who was he facing? If he was facing the first teamers, great. I'd be excited. Maybe you're actually making progress. But that's where you kind of have to temper it a little bit. And that's where you have to see him in these preseason games going out there against the number ones or even playing way above his head against those second teamers and lighting it on fire and just kind of showing, all right, yeah, maybe I can do this. I can do this. So that's where you kind of have to pump the brakes. I'm not taking the cheese just yet when it comes to N'Keal Harry. I have to see it to believe it when it comes to him because I got fooled when he first got drafted. I was like, oh, you got the big body Anquan Bolton type. Dude, this could be a stud. I had him as the number 3 guy behind A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf in that draft. And I flubbed that one as far as I thought. Oh, you're getting the third best guy. You're getting a guy that had a lot of potential, and he really hasn't lived up to it. So I took the cheese once. I'm not going to do it again. I swore I'm not going to do it again with Harry. I have to see it to believe it before I take it. But as far as as far as the actual game goes tomorrow, what we have to look forward to here. Again, you could come up with some other storylines like, well, you have the rookie class. How's the defense going to look? How's some of those new pieces? Now, obviously, you got to remember this is game 1, so you're not going to see a ton of the starters just yet. You'll probably see them next week because, again, remember this year there's only 3 preseason games because of them adding another regular season game. So we'll have to see how that all goes. I'm not sure. Maybe it might be week 3 still. Not sure. But The point being is that this first one, they're still probably aren't going to be, the starters are going to get maybe a series or two or maybe a quarter. And we're not sure how Belichick's going to handle it yet. But really, we could talk about we could talk about any of the other storylines, but really the only one that matters, the one that's 3 miles ahead of the whole pack with as far as it even being that even matters at this point, is who's going to start. How long is how long is Matt going to play? It's the quarterback battle. That's all that matters, because the NFL nowadays, we're long past defenses and running games being the primary way of you winning a championship. And I know last year you can say, well, the Bucs had a great defense, but yeah, you had Tom Brady, you had the GOAT. You had the GOAT actually absolutely stomp on Kansas City. And of course, it was Kansas City in the Super Bowl. Kansas City and Tampa in the Super Bowl. Those are two of the better offenses. Kansas City obviously was the best offense. But case in point right there. And Brady went winning 7 Super Bowls. It's offense and offense and offense and offense and offense over this last 15, I wouldn't say 20, because that early part of the Patriots dynasty was focused on defense. I think probably once you got past 2007, where that was the demarcation of offense and defense, where offense overtook defense, because that's where a lot of those high-flying offenses really came into fruition, because in 2004, that's where you had the Colts really start to kind of wake things up. But I think things came into full force when you had the Colts, obviously, in 07, but then you had the historic Patriots in 2007. They broke all the records that held until Peyton Manning went out to Denver in 2013 and 14. But you had Brady setting the all-time touchdown record until, again, Manning broke it. Then you had Randy Moss out there breaking the all-time receiving touchdown records with 23, which still holds to this day. But the point being, and then you've got the New Orleans Saints win a Super Bowl. You had the Green Bay Packers with Rodgers winning it. And then you've had the Kansas City Chiefs win in 2019. The days of the Baltimore Ravens in 2000, the Seattle, you're gonna have anomalies like the Seattle Seahawks in 2013. That was an anomaly in my books, anyways. More or less, this day and age, it's going to be the offenses that win you a Super Bowl. So, and what makes you a good offense? Having the quarterback. At this point in time, running games, unless you have an elite running back like Alvin Kamara, Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, Ezekiel Elliott, unless you have guys like that where they are dynamic, where you can get them involved in the passing games as well, and they're a dual threat to go 1,000 receiving, 1,000 rushing, or their 1,500-yard combined total offense between getting like somewhere between 1,200 rushing yards and 300 receiving to 400, 500 yard receiving. So if you're getting that 15 to somewhere between that 15 to 2,000 plus in that neighborhood, somewhere where they're the all-purpose scrimmage yards, where they're racking up all those, but still they have to have a quarterback with them. Kamara had Drew Brees. I know Brees in the last couple of years had a pop gun for an arm. It was shot, but the point being is that you have to have a quarterback. So that's the be all end all. So we can talk about, and we'll get into a little bit of it here, but really the thing that really matters is what happens with the quarterback. Now, obviously, that's where I've seen enough of Cam Newton. Even if he starts the first couple of series, I want to see Mac out there still with get 1 to 2 series with the first teamers. Get a couple series with those first teamers. Maybe Belichick throws them a bone, has them finish out the first quarter, and then after that, Mac Jones is playing with the second teamers. But I want to see him play with those first teamers for as long as he can, see what he can put up. And then I want to see him with those second teamers go out there and perform pretty well. Now, obviously, I'd love him to see him destroy the other team's second teamers, but is that going to be a reality here? Oh boy. Wow. Hey, I just happened to look up, and the Sox are absolutely pummeling Toronto. It is 14-0 Boston. So, man, have they broken out in a big way. Well, that is good to see. Maybe I feel a little bit better. So we'll see what happens. But getting back to the Patriots here, I honestly that's what I want to see. I want to see Mac Jones go out there, play with the first teamers, get a lot of time with those second teamers. I don't want to see him out there with the garbage time third stringers, fourth stringers, guys that are just going to be bagging groceries, as the old cliche goes, selling cars after the offseason is over. I want to see him with guys that are going to make an impact, those first teamers, though even some of those second teamers who have a shot at actually producing here in the regular season. That's where I want to see them give Mac as much time as possible. And if he succeeds, I'm not asking him to go out there in the first quarter, first 2 quarters, maybe they even give him a third, go out there and put up 400, 500 yards. I'm not asking him to go crazy, but I just want to see him go out there, execute the offense, look comfortable in the system, go out there and execute in those situations that he's presented in. And if he can pull that off, no, I know you're going to struggle. You're not going to go out there and give me your best game every single day. The great ones, the Bradys, the Rodgers, the Breezes, the Mannings, they all stumble. The Mahomes, they all have their bad games. But the point is that you want to put more good games together than you have bad. And that's really what I want to see in this game from when it comes to Mac Jones. Just go out there, show me that you can execute the offense, show me that you can make the critical, I know it's preseason, but you know what I mean, what would be critical plays come the regular season. Those situations that would be critical in the regular season. So that's what I want to see them do. Come out and play like that and give him those opportunities, even if Cam only gets that first series or two, and if he's quote unquote the starter for game number 1. And then maybe Belichick switches things around and puts Mac in as the starter next week. You never know. Obviously my hope is that maybe Mac gets the number 1 spot and gets to start the whole game, and starts from the get-go, and then he's the one that gets pulled for Cam. I don't think that's going to happen, but again, I just want to see him get time with the first teamers as much as he can in this game. Now, as far as the rest of the team goes, that's where there's not a lot of other really intriguing battles that are really going to be settled here. It's just going to be more and see if how some of those younger players that they got on that front 7 kind of play. Now, obviously, you're not gonna worry about guys like Matthew Judon or Dante Hightower. Those guys aren't going to play a lot. They're probably, if they play at all, it might be a series, not even a full quarter at all. It's just going to be maybe a series, not at all if they play. But it's guys like Ronnie Perkins, Anthony Jennings, guys that are on the bubble, or guys that are rookies, or those second-year guys where you want to see them take that step forward, or guys like Chase Winovich, where this is your shut up or put up type of year, which I've defended Chase Winovich in the past, but he has shown me that he gets literally run by those running backs, and on the running plays, he can't stop a damn nosebleed out there when it comes to the run game. Yeah, he can be in there and be a decent situational pass rusher, which maybe you might be able to get away with that now with the beefed up line that you have. But this is where I want to see those front 7 guys, those young guys, the Josh Uches, Anthony Jennings, like I said, Ronnie Perkins, those guys. I want to see the Harvey Langies. I want to see some of those guys go out there and see what they have left, see what they can do, see what they can contribute, because that's what's really going to make the difference for this team. Because we all know when you have Hightower back, you have Judon now, you have you have Kyle Van Noy that's back in the system, you have Lawrence Guy, so you have those veterans in the front seven, but it's going to be these younger guys that are on the edge that you've brought in, that you've drafted, that all the reports with Josh Uche is that it looks like he could be the step forward into being a key cog, dare I say it, a superstar out there on the edge, at least for the Patriots, how superstars go on the edge. Maybe you get that, but that's for me. That's the second storyline I'm watching tomorrow night. Although it would be on a delay because I have a men's league game, so I'll have to watch the reruns of that. It's preseason, so I'm not as worried about it. So don't get me wrong. I'd like to watch the thing live, but preseason you can afford to watch on a side note, you can't afford to watch that kind of off to the side. But the whole point being here with the Patriots, or with that defensive front, is it's more built on those young players. And in the secondary, you didn't really bring in too many guys in the draft in that area. That's more or less where you want to see Jawan Williams, see if he has anything. Maybe it might be to the point where he's a bigger body that you might have to move into the safety area. But there really hasn't been too much secondary wise that you're going to have to worry about, because you ended up getting Jalen Mills, but Mills isn't going to play a lot. So there's really nothing to look forward to on the back end of the defense when it comes. I know people will say Kyle Duggar, but to me, I saw enough out of Kyle Duggar in the regular season last year that his spot. Maybe not maybe he'll split time with Lawrence, with Phillips at that free, well, technically free safety, but kind of like that box safety position. So, but I've seen enough out of him where he's going to be a contributor. So there's really no young guys there that I'm really, really pumped up in the secondary to kind of watch. And this kind of same goes for running backs and wide receivers and that offensive line. I mean, yeah, everybody, don't get me wrong, you need the fatties there on the offensive line to be road graders and be pass protectors. But I mean, we know how that pretty much has shaken out. We know Onwenu, after last year being a breakout star, a rookie out of Michigan, is how he's looked. But running back, the only thing maybe would be running back when you have Ramondre Stevens, the big thumper, surprisingly has some speed out of the backfield there that they drafted out of Oklahoma. Maybe he might shine. That would be something to kind of watch. He could be that third running back in that stable. I say third from the actual running back standpoint because we all know that James White is kind of the third back. He's more the specialist of the pass catcher, third down, change of pace. Like I said, obviously he's more the pass catcher type of guy. Go out there, run screens, run some wheels, run some outs, run some of those outlet routes. Occasionally he'll come in and run. So maybe Ramondre Stevens can cement himself as that quote unquote third actual running back, be that power back when you have to take out Damian Harris, who I think, like I said, I think Damian Harris is going to be a stud. Once we kind of get into that season opener preview show, we'll spotlight him as one of those breakout type of players. But really, you're looking at, like I said, offensively, it's, to me, besides the quarterback, to me, it's really only going to be Ramondre Stevens and possibly Devin Asiasi to see because just to see if Asiasi can build off those last two games that he had, because he had that 2 touchdown game against the Jets to close things out in the regular season. That was pretty much it. But now when you have Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith, who could be legitimate number ones on anybody else's offense, they're going to be the main cogs of your offense for whoever your quarterback ends up being, which hopefully it's Mac. But with that injury to Hunter Henry, who the reports are it's not going to be serious, it might keep him out of the preseason, but he should be ready to go come regular season in week 1. But when it comes to that third tight end, which depending on how things go with Hunter Henry, because he's always dinged up, that could be a big spot where Ossie could be that third tight end and fill in for Henry if he gets dinged up or if Jonnu Smith gets dinged up. I think that's the only other offensive piece that I really would be watching is Ossie just to see how he kind of folds into that offense and becomes that third tight end. Maybe depending on if you put Jonnu Smith out there as that type of flex receiver tight end, which has been talked about a lot here, then maybe you bring in Ossie as one of those other two tight ends or in a three tight ends that really. So you see how that kind of goes. Other than that, I mean, everything else is I'm not saying set in stone, but there's a lot more veteran guys that have already know either what the role is, or if they're new, they know that they're a veteran and they know that they have either their first or second or third wide receiver or the second or third linebacker or edge rusher, something along those lines, because you already kind of know what your role is and you're a veteran, you're not going to play much. So it's really, to me, obviously it's quarterback far and ahead of any other position. Excuse me, any other position out there on the field that you're looking at. How is this going to go? And then, like I said, secondarily to that, it's going to be those young players on the defensive front. And those are really, really the big two. Other than that, everything else is kind of minor. Like I said, Ramondre Stevens going to be the third kind of thumper. Can he? And then also, is Devin Ossie going to be that third tight end? Is he going to be that guy that can fill in for Hunter Henry if he has to miss time? Or if you split out one of those tight ends as a wide receiver, is he going to be like that more inline tight end type of guy? How is that going to work out? So right now, those would be the keys to watch in week number 1. Like I said, Mac Jones, that's really the big one. Quarterback and Mac Jones, that's the big one right there. How is that going to unfold in week 1 and moving forward? And obviously, if there are any kind of other surprising stories that come out of it or in the next week, we'll keep an eye on that for you as well. But as far as Patriots training camp and Patriots preseason, as that starts to unfold here, that's really the big juicy stories as of right now. Now, the other big story that kind of broke here in the last couple hours or last couple days was that Dennis Schroeder, who was a point guard for the Lakers and previously for the Atlanta Hawks, was looking to get a 4 to 5 year deal of $120 million. So he opted out of a 4-year, $84 million deal with to go back to the Lakers. But that looks like that might come back to bite him in the ass, or it really already did bite him in the ass, because he had to sign a 1-year deal worth $6.8 million with the Boston Celtics. For the Celtics, selfishly, I like that. It's good because you get a guy that's on a 1-year prove-it deal. You get a guy that is not going to cost you a lot, not locked up long term, and give you depth at the point guard position. And honestly, he might be neck and neck there with Marcus Smart for your starting point guard. I think right now, unless you trade Marcus Smart, he's your starter. But then you've built good depth at the guard position there. You have Peyton Pritchard and Romeo Langford, who can play a little bit who's kind of a swing guy guard, a little bit of a small forward. So he's kind of in between there, but you have good, decent depth, I should say, not good, but you have decent depth there now to kind of pair him with Tatum and Brown. Now, obviously, I still don't think the Celtics are going to be anywhere higher than maybe the 6th seed. I think that might be their goal this year, to get to that 6th seed, just because I think right now they're building for, when I say the future, I don't mean like what they did when they drafted Tatum and Brown, where they were trying to hope that these guys panned out. I think now you have those two guys where you're building for the future, as in you're clearing the deck in cap space so that you can go out there and that you can get the Bradley Beals and those other superstars that are going to be available. Now, some of those that were like Durant and some of the others have signed some long-term extensions or did sign some deals with some of their teams that they've got traded to. So it might not be as robust of a free agent market, but still, I think that's where your building that room to get a Bradley Beal, and you bring up Bradley Beal just because he's good friends with Jason Tatum, and instead of having to trade away Jaylen Brown, you might have a wink deal in place to bring in a Bradley Beal to pair him with the other two. So there's your big three. And then that's where, if you clear the deck with the cap space, then there goes other things that you can bring in. Maybe you bring back a Dennis Schroeder if he likes it here, and you can have another piece to that puzzle, or you bring in some other pieces at point and at center. And oh, by the way, the Celtics did bring back Enes Kanter. I think we might have mentioned that in the last show, but I mean, just throwing that in there where we're talking Celtics. So they have some okay depth at center. I mean, you have the always seems like he's the proverbial talented, but will he unlock it finally? And Time Lord in Robert Williams. Not sure. We saw flashes out of him last year where it looked like he might go on runs and be a good big man, but then he would kind of come back down to earth. But if you can get more consistency out of Robert Williams, then you might have something there. And then you brought in Al Horford back. Now, he's still average out of me, and I don't think he's going to be anything special, but at least you have some depth there. You have a veteran leader, and then you brought in Enes Kanter. So Enes Kanter, Jesus, I said Enes Kanter. So you have depth there, but I do like what they're doing with Schroeder. You do end up getting some depth at point, and we'll see how that goes. Now, this was something kind of interesting as we get to our last segment of the day with our Little Things segment. I was watching the season premiere of Hard Knocks before the show today, right after I got out of work, and I mean it was good. It wasn't the best Hard Knocks I've ever seen, but it definitely was not the worst. There were entertaining parts with Jerry Jones. And for side note here, who the hell puts salt on a McGriddle? I could see maybe if you have a regular breakfast sandwich, a McMuffin, something that needs a little bit of salt. Not that McMuffin would, because McDonald's puts enough salt on their cheese and ham and everything else, and all the butter that they melt that they cook it in. But what I'm saying is that it just made me laugh that he's putting salt on a McGriddle. I'm like, why would you put salt on pancakes? That's just weird. Weird. Who does that? I trust me. I mean, I need to lose a little weight here. I'm not fat, but I'm what you would call skinny fat. But I do love me a McGriddle. I really do. When I do end up getting McDonald's and I'm not playing men's league baseball, because that thing would sit like a ton of bricks. But if I have to get up early in the morning, I'm going somewhere, and I'm not planning on working out and running around, a McGriddle I love those McGriddles. Shouldn't have them all the time, but man, I would never put a packet of salt. I'd never put ketchup. I'd never put any hot sauce, because it's pancakes. If I'm getting the McGriddle, I want that sweet and savory taste to it. So I'm not dumping a bunch of salt on it. That was just weird. Sorry, that was just kind of caught me off guard with a little kind of disgusting, but oh well, whatever. You do you, Jerry. Side note is you don't have a chef there. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I love McGriddles, but you don't have a chef there to make you some fresh breakfast. You're the damn owner of the Cowboys, the number one most valuable sports franchise in America, and I think top 5 in the world. So, anyways, that part was kind of that made me laugh a little bit. But the thing that I wanted to kind of touch on here quickly is that with Mike McCarthy, when in that whole scene where he's out there, where he plays the Austin Powers, we have to have here's our Mojo segment. We're going to have Mojo. When we're getting down there, we're going to need a little Mojo. And then he's out there on the field and he blows the whistle and he gets on the headset that's hooked up to the loudspeaker, and It's mojo time, and they're out there, and it's a good offense go over here, defense go over here. Let's get ready for mojo. I don't know why I went for Michael Buffer in that situation. I am not going to repeat that, or because I'm not going to say his saying because I don't feel like getting sued because I don't have money. But the whole point being in this situation is that I just watching how Mike McCarthy ran that. It's just like, no wonder why you got fired from the Packers. You're an idiot. You are probably one of the worst coaches in football, and how you won a Super. Well, I know how you won a Super Bowl because you had Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback, and you had a pretty good defense with Clay Matthews and Charles Woodson, AJ Hawk, and BJ Raji. So you kind of had a foolproof way where you actually probably should have won more titles. Should have, but I digress on that. The point is that Mike McCarthy is a boob. He is a boob. How he managed to win, how he manages to still have a job just with, oh, we're going to have mojo. It's like, you're a grown-ass man coaching NFL players. I could see if, like, that's a high school move. That's something that my high school coach would have done. Oh, let's play the clip of Austin Powers in the mojo, and let's get you some mojo back. Okay, you're high school, you're a D3. I wouldn't even do that if it's D1, for Christ's sake. Maybe at some colleges, now you can get some of those pump up type of coaches like an Ed Ogeron or some guys like that, or Mike Gundy. You can get those guys that'll try to pump you up. Trust me, I'm not going to sit here and name them all because in college there's a lot of them. But Ed Ogeron comes to mind a lot. Go Tigers! Actually, will college football come back? I can't wait to see them little Tigers. It'll be fun to see Ed out there and out in the bayou there, and it'll be fun. So go Tigers! Don't worry, folks. That's how he speaks. I was not stuttering, not having a stuttering issue, and not dropping in the arms. That's just how he talks. So cool yourself. But anyways, my point being is that he's how can you manage to do that as a professional coach? These guys are getting paid millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars. There's plenty of motivation out there. I just think it's child. Listen, I'm not saying don't go out there and have fun. Have plenty of fun. Like when the Raiders brought in Frank Caliendo to make fun of Gruden, that was fun. That was funny. But this kind of seemed forced, and this seemed like, oh, I'm coaching high school kids. Oh, the practice is getting a little slow. Time to have mojo. Let's get some mojo. Yeah, it's just so forced. And so how about instead of running goddamn mojo during practice where you have a mojo minute or whatever the hell you're calling it out there, how about you focus on, let's see, running situational football, running this, whatever you need to improve on. If you notice that, hey, my defense is out there sucking wind or it's out there getting gashed, how about, maybe we'll try working on this 4-3 defense where we'll run a few nickel packages or whatever you're getting, you know what I mean? If you're getting gassed doing something, or on offense, your guys are out there running horrible routes, or you're not doing well in red zone offense or situational offense. And no, let's have mojo because, everything looks a little down at practice. Mojo. No, that's freaking high school shit there. That's D3 college. You're in the pros. No wonder why you got fired from the Packers, and no wonder why Aaron Rodgers hated your ass. I know Rodgers isn't exactly the first guy that I'm going to sit there and defend, but Jesus Christ, that episode of Hard Knocks, it just made me laugh. I'm like, you, sir, are a boob, and how you are still an NFL coach, I don't know, and how you got to take hold of the Dallas Cowboys reins. Hang on, before I finish that, I know why. Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones is your owner and your general manager. That's why, because he likes to run a circus. Even if he wins a Super Bowl, just look at all those teams in the 90s. There's all kinds of stuff going on. Yeah, they were loaded with Hall of Famers, and Jimmy Johnson actually was a Hall of Fame. He is a Hall of Fame coach. He made it to the Hall of Fame, but he is a great coach. He should have stayed longer in Dallas, and I digress on that. But the point being is that they were still a circus even when they're winning, but they had a great coach, and they had somebody that could corral all of the circus that was going on there. And you had guys like Troy Aikman, who didn't take anybody's BS, and Michael Irvin, who would go out party and all the stories. But guess what? He came there to play in game days, blah, 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 blah. But it's just, not saying that these guys don't exist there in Dallas now, but it's just like, it just seems like the circus is in town every time they were Jerry, and Mike McCarthy is just clown number one. He's the boob out there running the show. And I can see why after week one of Hard Knocks. So just as a Patriots fan, to kind of watch this this train wreck go down, or possible train wreck, it's going to be fun. This might actually be a halfway decent season of Hard Knocks. So that'll do it for this episode of New England Sports Weekly. As always, I'm your host, Sean Metcalf. Give me a follow at Sean_Met28. Or the show account at NE Sports Weekly on Twitter. And give us a like, give us a subscribe on the YouTube channel, or give us a like and subscribe on Spotify or SoundCloud. Just search the show New England Sports Weekly and subscribe and like on all those episodes and to the show. And send us any comments, any questions. I'd love to have you. Next week, we'll try to get some special guests on here. Well, as we'll get closer to the NFL season, break some things down. Of course, we'll monitor the Red Sox here. Hopefully tonight, it looks like they might actually be coming out of it here. They're up 14-1. Things are looking good there tonight. Knock on wood. And then obviously we'll break down preseason game one. Look forward to the second preseason game and see how things have gone there. So we'll definitely have plenty to talk about next week. Until then, everybody have a good night, have a good day, have a good week.